I took a deep breath as I walked into the dimly lit halls of the high school, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The school had always been eerily quiet at night, but tonight felt different. I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that clung to me, fueled by the strange rumors about what happens at 3:07 a.m. As the new night security guard, it was my job to investigate. My footsteps echoed through the empty corridors, the usual creaks and groans of the old building, amplified by the silence. I made my way through the school, checking each room and ensuring everything was in order. The air felt colder tonight, and I noticed shadows moving in the corners of my vision. I paused occasionally, trying to pinpoint the source of the unsettling sounds. In the storage room, I found a stack of old boxes and forgotten equipment. The room was cluttered and dusty, and the musty smell made me wrinkle my nose. As I inspected the area, I heard a faint rustling noise coming from the back of the room. I turned around, but the space was empty. Just the same old boxes and equipment. The noise was sporadic, like something or someone was moving around. I decided to check the old library, where the rumors had been particularly strange. The library was as quiet as the rest of the school, with rows of dusty books and empty tables. I flicked my flashlight across the room, and the beam revealed nothing out of the ordinary. Yet the atmosphere felt charged, as if something unseen was lurking just beyond my perception. As I walked through the library, the clock on the wall ticked loudly, its hands approaching 3:07. The rumors had mentioned that this specific time was crucial, but I didn't know what to expect. I tried to remain calm, focusing on my duties and trying to shake off the growing sense of dread. The school was old, and it was easy to let imagination run wild in the darkness. February 22nd, 2024. As I continued my night shift, I couldn't shake the sense of unease that had settled over me. I kept thinking about the old storage room and the strange noises I had heard. Determined to uncover more, I revisited the room, searching for any clues that could explain the unsettling occurrences. The air was thick with dust, and the room felt even colder than before. While rummaging through the boxes, I discovered a large, dusty book hidden beneath some old equipment. The book's cover was worn, and its spine cracked with age. The pages inside were filled with handwritten notes and sketches that seemed to detail various strange events that had occurred in the school over the years. The notes mentioned peculiar occurrences at exactly 3:07 a.m., aligning with the rumors I had heard. One entry in particular caught my eye. It described a previous security guard who had vanished under mysterious circumstances after investigating similar occurrences. The guard's notes hinted at a pattern related to a hidden chamber within the school. My heart raced as I realized that the pattern was tied to the mysterious time of 3:07 a.m. With renewed determination, I decided to search for this hidden chamber. According to the notes, it should be somewhere in the basement, concealed behind a false wall. I headed to the basement, feeling a mix of apprehension and excitement. The basement was dark and musty, filled with old maintenance equipment and forgotten items. I began inspecting the walls, looking for any signs of a concealed entrance. As the clock ticked closer to 3:07 a.m., I felt an intense pressure in the air, as if the building itself was holding its breath. The basement's darkness seemed to close in around me, and the silence was punctuated only by the sound of my own breathing. I found a section of the wall that felt different from the rest, and my heart pounded as I prepared to investigate further. The wall section I had discovered seemed to hide something significant behind it. I carefully examined it for any clues that might indicate how to open it. The surface was old and cracked, with faint markings that resembled symbols or writing. My flashlight flickered over the markings, and a sense of urgency grew stronger as 3:07 a.m. approached. I found a small, rusted lever embedded in the wall, partially hidden by dust and debris. With a deep breath, I pulled the lever, and the wall creaked and groaned as it slowly shifted, revealing a narrow passage. The passage was dark and foreboding, its air damp and stale. I hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside, guided by the beam of my flashlight. The passage led me down a steep, narrow staircase into a dimly lit room. The walls were lined with old, dusty shelves filled with strange artifacts and documents. The room had an unsettling aura, with the items on the shelves casting eerie shadows. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I was in a place no one had likely entered for years. On one of the shelves, I found a collection of old photographs and a small, ornate box. The photographs showed various scenes of the school from decades ago, including images of previous security guards and staff members. The box was intricately carved with symbols similar to those on the wall. I carefully opened it, revealing a collection of letters and a journal. The journal was filled with cryptic entries about a guardian spirit that protected the school and the need for vigilance at 3:07 a.m. The entries described how the guardian would manifest at this specific time to ward off a malevolent force. I realized that the disturbances I had been experiencing were likely related to this guardian's efforts to protect the school. With the journal's revelations in mind, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The guardian spirit's role was to protect the school from an unseen threat, manifesting precisely at 3:07 a.m. As the time approached, I prepared myself for whatever might come. I made my way back to the basement, where the hidden chamber seemed to hold the key to understanding the Guardian's mission. The room's atmosphere grew colder, and an eerie silence enveloped me. I placed the photographs and letters on a nearby table, trying to piece together the significance of each item. The Guardian spirit, as described in the journal, had been a protector who had taken drastic measures to ensure the school's safety. I wondered if the disturbances I had experienced were a result of the Guardian's attempts to fulfill its duty. As the clock struck 3:07 a.m., a sudden, intense cold swept through the room. Shadows on the walls seemed to come alive, moving in unnatural patterns. I felt a strong, invisible presence, and the air crackled with energy. The old artifacts on the shelves began to shift, and the room seemed to pulse with a strange rhythmic force. I realized that the Guardian was making its presence known. I followed the sensations of the presence to a corner of the room where a faded old mural depicted a scene of protection. The mural showed the Guardian battling a dark, indistinct figure, surrounded by symbols of warding. The energy in the room intensified as the Guardian's presence grew stronger. I felt a mixture of awe and fear as I understood the gravity of the Guardian's mission. In a final act of clarity, the Guardian seemed to communicate a message through the shifting shadows and energy. It was a plea for assistance to help it complete its protective task and ensure the safety of the school. I vowed to honor the Guardian's mission, understanding now that the disturbances and the time of 3:07 a.m. were not merely threats, but a call for support. The school's safety depended on recognizing and aiding the Guardian's efforts. February 25th, 2024. As dawn broke, the cold and eerie atmosphere of the previous night began to dissipate. The school seemed to return to its usual quiet state, but I felt a profound sense of relief and accomplishment. The Guardian's presence had been intense, but I had managed to aid in its mission. I knew that the information I had discovered and the Guardian's protection were crucial for the school's safety. I carefully packed up the photographs, letters, and journal, ensuring that they would be preserved and respected. The school's history was now intertwined with the story of the Guardian, a protector that had been misunderstood for years. I resolved to share what I had learned with the school administration, hoping that they would honor the Guardian's legacy and recognize the importance of the 3:07 a.m. phenomenon. As I left the school, I took one last look at the old building, feeling a deep connection to the history and mystery it held. The Guardian's mission was complete, and the school was safe once more. The knowledge I had gained was both a burden and a gift, but it was a responsibility I was willing to bear. The experience had changed me. I had faced the unknown, understood the significance of the Guardian's presence, and helped preserve the safety of the school. The echoes of the past and the Guardian's vigilance would remain a part of me, a reminder of the thin line between the ordinary and the extraordinary. As I walked away from the school, the weight of the night's events lifted, replaced by a sense of peace. The school would continue to stand as a testament to the Guardian's protection, and I would carry the memory of my vigil with me. The mystery had been solved, and the Guardian's mission fulfilled, bringing a sense of closure and hope for the future. March 14th, 2022. The school had been abandoned for years, but tonight I found myself back there, drawn by a strange sense of curiosity and unease. I was the new security guard assigned to oversee the old building until it could be fully renovated. The rumors about the place were unsettling, whispers of what happens precisely at 3:07 a.m. My shift had just begun, and the air was thick with anticipation. The hallway was cloaked in shadows, with the only light coming from the flickering bulbs overhead. The once bustling corridors now felt cold and lifeless. I walked through the halls, the sound of my footsteps echoing against the empty lockers. The building seemed to breathe, its old walls groaning with the weight of forgotten memories. As I rounded a corner, I noticed a door slightly ajar, one that had been locked and sealed during my earlier inspections. The door led to a storage closet that had been closed off for years. I approached cautiously, feeling a chill creep up my spine. The air around the door felt different, heavier, as if something unseen was watching me. Inside the closet, I found old boxes and furniture covered in dust. Among the clutter, there was a stack of old files and photographs, some of which depicted students and staff from decades ago. One photo stood out, a group of people standing in front of the school, their faces blurred and distorted. The photo's edges were frayed, and a sense of foreboding seemed to emanate from it. My flashlight's beam caught a glimpse of a faded note pinned to the wall behind the clutter. The note was scribbled with frantic handwriting and spoke of a hidden room that appeared at exactly 3:07 a.m. It mentioned a dark history associated with this room, but the details were unclear. The time on the note matched the rumors, and a sense of dread mixed with intrigue settled over me. The old storage closet had left me with more questions than answers. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something crucial hidden in that building. Determined to uncover the truth, I returned to the school that evening, armed with the note and a renewed sense of purpose. The building seemed even more foreboding in the dim light of the setting sun. I made my way to the storage closet, feeling a mix of apprehension and excitement. The photograph and note were now my guide, and I hoped they would lead me to the hidden room mentioned. The air was cooler than before, and the silence was punctuated only by the occasional creak of the old building settling. As I began to search the closet more thoroughly, I noticed a loose floorboard beneath a pile of old furniture. With some effort, I pried it up, revealing a small, dusty space beneath. My flashlight illuminated a collection of old, weathered journals and more photographs. Among them was another note, this one more detailed, describing the layout of the hidden room. The note mentioned a mechanism that would reveal the hidden room when activated at precisely 3:07 a.m. I checked my watch and saw that the time was approaching. The anticipation was almost unbearable as I tried to piece together the instructions from the note. The mechanism involved a specific sequence of actions, which I followed meticulously. At exactly 3:07 a.m., a low rumble echoed through the building. The floor shifted slightly, and a hidden panel in the wall began to slide open. Behind it was a narrow passageway, cloaked in darkness. My heart pounded as I stepped into the passage, the air growing colder and denser with each step. The passage led to a small, dimly lit room, filled with dusty relics and old, forgotten equipment. The hidden room was like stepping into a forgotten era, its air thick with dust and the remnants of years gone by. The room was cluttered with old furniture and boxes, the remnants of a time when the school was alive with activity. My flashlight revealed shelves lined with strange artifacts and faded documents. I approached a large, ornate desk in the center of the room. On top of the desk was an old ledger, its pages yellowed and brittle. The ledger was filled with handwritten notes detailing various occurrences and events at the school, some of which were marked with ominous symbols and dates. My eyes were drawn to a specific entry that mentioned an important event at 3:07 a.m. The entry described how the room had been used for a secretive purpose many years ago, involving ceremonies and rituals that were believed to protect the school from dark forces. It appeared that the hidden room was once a center of occult activity, intended to safeguard the institution from supernatural threats. The significance of 3:07 a.m. was tied to these rituals. The more I read, the clearer it became that the disturbances and strange occurrences were tied to these old practices. The ledger suggested that the rituals had been abandoned, but the energy they had left behind still lingered in the building. The timing of 3:07 a.m. was crucial to the rituals, and it seemed that the room's protective powers were somehow still active. As I continued to explore the room, I found a series of old photographs depicting people performing rituals in the very room I was in. The images were eerie, showing figures in dark robes and arcane symbols drawn on the floor. The connection between these rituals and the disturbances in the school was becoming increasingly apparent. The room was not just a relic of the past, it was a crucial part of the school's history, holding secrets that had been buried for decades. The energy I felt was a remnant of those old practices, and it was clear that something significant had been left unfinished. My sense of unease grew as I realized that there was more to uncover, and the mysteries of the room were far from resolved. As I delved deeper into the hidden room, I could feel the weight of the past pressing down on me. The old documents and artifacts hinted at a dark history, and the eerie atmosphere made it clear that something significant had occurred in this space. The ledger's accounts of rituals and ceremonies only added to the growing sense of foreboding. I focused on a particularly old and ornate book lying on a shelf. Its cover was adorned with strange symbols, and its pages were filled with intricate illustrations and arcane text. The book appeared to be a guide to the rituals performed in the room, detailing the procedures and purpose of each ceremony. I carefully opened it, feeling a chill run through me as I did. The book described a series of rituals meant to protect the school from malevolent entities. The rituals involved elaborate ceremonies conducted at specific times, with 3:07 a.m. being a focal point. The text suggested that these rituals created a protective barrier around the school, warding off any supernatural threats. The barriers had weakened over time, leading to the disturbances I had experienced. As I read further, I came across a section that described an unfinished ritual, one that had been abandoned for reasons unknown. The ritual was intended to reinforce the protective barrier, but it had never been completed. The incomplete ritual seemed to be the source of the recent disturbances, as the barrier was no longer fully effective. A sense of urgency grew within me. The unfinished ritual needed to be completed to restore the protective barrier and resolve the disturbances. I knew that I had to act quickly, but I was unsure of how to proceed with the ancient rites described in the book. The clock was ticking, and I felt the weight of responsibility pressing on me. The passage of time was crucial, and I had to ensure that the ritual was performed correctly. As the clock neared 3:07 a.m., I prepared to follow the instructions in the book. The room's atmosphere grew colder, and the sense of anticipation was palpable. The completion of the ritual was my only hope to restore the protective barrier and bring peace to the troubled school. The air in the hidden room was charged with a palpable energy as I prepared to complete the unfinished ritual. The book's instructions were complex, requiring precise timing and specific actions. The clock on the wall ticked ominously, counting down to the crucial moment of 3:07 a.m. I felt a mixture of anxiety and determination as I set up the ritual space. I followed the steps outlined in the book, drawing symbols on the floor with chalk and arranging the artifacts according to the instructions. The old photographs and documents had given me a rough idea of what needed to be done, but the actual execution required careful attention to detail. My hands shook slightly as I worked, aware of the weight of the task at hand. As the clock approached 3:07 a.m., the atmosphere in the room grew increasingly intense. The air seemed to vibrate, and the temperature dropped significantly. Shadows on the walls flickered and danced, as if reacting to the ritual's preparation. I took a deep breath, focusing on the task at hand and trying to ignore the creeping sense of dread. At exactly 3:07 a.m., I completed the final step of the ritual, lighting a series of candles arranged in a specific pattern. The room was suddenly illuminated by their flickering light, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. I could feel a shift in the room's energy, a sense of something being restored or resolved. The disturbances that had plagued the school seemed to recede, replaced by a sense of calm and stillness. The protective barrier, once weakened, felt reestablished. The room's oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the cold, heavy air was replaced by a more peaceful ambiance. The ritual had been successful, but the experience left me with a profound sense of respect for the building's dark history. As I left the hidden room, I took one last look around, feeling a sense of accomplishment and relief. The school, with its secrets and mysteries, had been safeguarded once again. The knowledge of the unfinished ritual and the ancient practices would remain with me, a reminder of the delicate balance between the known and the unknown. The night had been both a trial and a revelation, and I walked away with a deep understanding of the school's enigmatic past. October 8th, 2023. The school grounds were unusually quiet as I arrived for my late shift. I was the new night security guard at the old campus, which had been closed for renovations. Despite the visible signs of decay, the place held a certain charm, almost as if it were waiting for something. Rumors of hauntings and strange occurrences had circulated among the staff, especially about the time around 3:07 a.m. The halls were dimly lit by flickering fluorescent lights that cast long shadows on the cracked tile floors. I walked through the corridors, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, revealing the remnants of a bygone era. Empty classrooms and abandoned offices filled with dust and cobwebs. The air was thick with a sense of abandonment, and every creak of the building seemed amplified in the silence. I checked the security cameras, which showed nothing out of the ordinary. Yet, there was an uneasy feeling that seemed to linger in the corners of the building. The whispers of past hauntings were not just stories. They felt tangible in the cold air. As I passed the old auditorium, I noticed the door slightly ajar, a faint light seeping through the crack. I had definitely shut it earlier. Curiosity getting the better of me, I pushed open the door. The auditorium was in disarray, with broken seats and dusty stage curtains. The light source was a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. As I walked in, the temperature dropped suddenly, and an inexplicable chill ran down my spine. The air felt heavy, almost oppressive, as if the room was holding its breath. On the stage, I saw an old tattered book lying open on a dusty piano. The pages were yellowed, and the writing was in a script I couldn't immediately recognize. I approached the piano, my flashlight revealing faint symbols and phrases written in the book. An unsettling sensation of being watched grew stronger, and the room seemed to close in around me. The book on the piano had kept me awake all night. Its unsettling symbols and cryptic messages hinted at something dark and unresolved. I returned to the school, determined to uncover the book's secrets and understand the source of the eerie sensations I'd felt. The night was clear and crisp, but an underlying tension seemed to hang in the air. Entering the auditorium once more, I found the book exactly where I had left it. The flickering bulb overhead cast eerie shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. I examined the book closely, noticing that the symbols were repeated in a pattern across the pages. There was a distinct sense of urgency in the text, suggesting that something important was supposed to happen at a specific time, 3:07 a.m. As the clock ticked closer to 3:07 a.m., the building's atmosphere shifted. The temperature dropped noticeably, and an oppressive silence enveloped the space. I could feel a palpable sense of dread, as if the very walls of the auditorium were holding their breath. The shadows seemed to grow longer and more menacing, moving in sync with the rising tension. The book's symbols began to glow faintly, and I noticed a similar glow emanating from the stage floor. The symbols on the floor aligned with those in the book, creating a pattern that seemed to pulse with a strange energy. The light from the symbols grew stronger, and I felt an overwhelming sense of being drawn into the pattern. as if the very fabric of reality was shifting. At precisely 3:07 a.m., the auditorium was filled with a sudden rush of cold air. The shadows on the walls converged into a dark, swirling mass at the center of the stage. The temperature plummeted, and I could see my breath fogging in the icy air. The feeling of being watched intensified, and the dark mass seemed to take on a more defined shape, as if something, or someone, was emerging from it. The events of the previous night were burned into my memory. The dark mass had seemed almost alive, pulsing with a malevolent energy. I had managed to escape the auditorium, but the haunting presence lingered in my thoughts. Determined to understand what I had witnessed, I returned to the school with a sense of foreboding. I decided to investigate the history of the book, hoping it might shed light on the dark presence I had encountered. In the school's old archives, I found records of a mysterious incident from decades ago. The documents mentioned a group of students and teachers who had performed occult rituals, claiming they were trying to summon a protective spirit for the school. Their efforts had apparently backfired, leading to a series of unexplained events and disappearances. The more I read, the more I realize that the book was a key element in the failed ritual. The symbols were part of a summoning process meant to bind a spirit to the school. Instead, the ritual had opened a conduit for something dark and malevolent. The timing of the disturbances, particularly at 3:07 a.m., was crucial, marking the moment when the spirit's influence was strongest. As the clock approached 3:07 a.m. once again, I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. The atmosphere in the school grew heavier, and the familiar sense of dread returned. I decided to return to the auditorium, hoping to confront whatever was haunting the place. The building was silent, save for the distant creaks and groans of the old structure. When I entered the auditorium, the stage was empty, but the eerie glow of the symbols had returned. The temperature dropped sharply, and I could see my breath misting in the frigid air. The dark mass reappeared, more defined and menacing than before. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, and I could sense the malevolent force reaching out, almost as if it was trying to communicate or interact with me. The dark mass seemed to pulse with an almost tangible malice as I faced it in the auditorium. Its presence was both terrifying and sorrowful, an entity caught between dimensions, fueled by the failed ritual's dark energy. I needed to find a way to resolve this haunting once and for all, but the fear gnawed at me, making each step toward the stage feel like a journey through ice. The book's pages had described a ritual intended to banish the dark presence, but I had little hope of performing it correctly without further guidance. Desperation drove me to examine the book again, searching for any overlooked instructions. The symbols on the stage floor seemed to resonate with the book's text. Their faint glow acting as a guide, I began to trace the symbols on the floor, mimicking the patterns described in the book. The process was meticulous, and as I worked, I could feel the oppressive atmosphere intensify. The dark mass loomed larger, its form becoming more distinct and malevolent. It felt as if the entity was aware of my efforts, reacting to each movement with a growing sense of agitation. As the clock approached 3:07 a.m., I completed the final pattern and performed the necessary incantations. The room's temperature dropped even further, and the dark mass seemed to writhe and twist as if in pain. The faint light from the symbols flickered violently, casting erratic shadows that danced around the auditorium. My heart raced, and a sense of impending doom filled the space. At the stroke of 3:07 a.m., there was a deafening silence. The dark mass shuddered violently, and then, with a final, haunting wail, it began to dissipate. The symbols on the floor faded, and the temperature slowly began to return to normal. The auditorium, once filled with dread, was now eerily calm. The malevolent presence had vanished, but the sense of loss and sadness lingered. The haunting was over, but its impact on me was profound. The silence that followed the vanishing of the dark mass was heavy with an unsettling calm. The auditorium, once a place of terror, now felt like a space of quiet reflection. Despite the apparent resolution, the experience had left a mark on me. The memories of the haunting would linger, and the sorrowful energy of the school seemed to seep into my very being. I left the auditorium with a heavy heart, the weight of what I had witnessed hanging over me. The school, though quiet, seemed to carry a mournful air, as if it were mourning the events that had transpired. The corridors, now less menacing, felt almost like they were sighing with relief. Yet, there was an undeniable sadness in the stillness. The book, now closed and resting on the piano, was a stark reminder of the darkness that had been part of the school's history. I realized that while I had managed to banish the immediate threat, the history of the place, its past rituals and hidden sorrows, would always be a part of it. The book and the dark mass were gone, but the echoes of their presence would remain. As I walked through the empty hallways one last time, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The sorrowful energy of the school seemed to linger, as if the building itself was mourning the loss of something that had been tied to it for so long. The haunting was over, but it had left a profound impact on me. I turned off the lights and locked up the building, leaving behind the echoes of the past. The school would continue its renovations, but its haunted history would remain a silent testament to the dark chapter that had been unearthed. As I drove away, I looked back one last time, feeling a mix of relief and melancholy. The haunting of October had ended, but its memory would stay with me forever.